Hello, and welcome to Coffee and Comics. I'm Todd A.
And I am Mark Sargent. Flat Earther at... Sorry.
Well, if you were, you would be wearing a T-shirt that says that. That is what we have learned from Ono, Ross, and Carey, is that Mark Sargent wears a T-shirt that says, I am Mark Sargent.
That's right. And
so
we were
the
just
media
talking...
can find him.
We were just talking about... We're big fans of Ono, Ross, and Carey, and we were just talking about their latest episode where they go antagonize Flat Earthers, and Mark Sargent...
on purpose. They are trying to conduct a rational experiment.
Oh, I know, but I think just existing...
Flat Earthers are antagonizing them.
Yeah, I think just existing, you sort of antagonize them. But Mark Sargent is sort of the godfather of the modern movement. So that's the... If you're interested in just how far down the rabbit hole Crazy goes, go Google his name and don't watch his videos. But I don't
know. He could be right about that ice wall. Yeah.
No. The ice wall fell last season. The Night King tore it down. So even it's a moot point at this juncture.
Yeah. I got no segue from that. It's a rough thing that people believe. Anyway, we actually call this show Coffee and Comics. Why is that, Taylor?
It's because, Todd, we every week will pick a comic or graphic novel that we're reading and enjoying and share it with you, as well as talk about a beverage or two that we might be drinking. This particular episode we are recording in the evening, as we've sort of been want to do, it seems like the last month or two. And as a result, I am not drinking a coffee for the first time in a long time. I have just got a glass of standard Manitou Springs water, and that be it. I'm a little lame this week.
Wait, is Manitou Springs known for like its spring water?
It is. It is, but this is not that. This is just the municipal tap in all its glory. So, which is,
tap water
as municipal taps go, it's right up there, but it's not certainly not their Ute spring water.
Yeah, I as well have no coffee to speak of. Right now I'm drinking a Bundaberg ginger beer.
Oh,
yeah, we could almost do Bundaberg and comic books. However, we would alliterate that.
Okay, let me ask you this. Where do you get that? Because I have been looking for it since I had it at your house that one time we did that joint podcast. Yeah, and I just can't. Every once in a great while I'll find it, but it's not consistent.
It is now in my local Ralph's, which people on the other side of the Mississippi know as Kroger. So it's in big chain groceries, but maybe I'm just a little bit closer to Australia, and that's why we get it here. I don't know.
You're 100 miles. Actually, you're more than that. You're 1,500 miles closer to Australia.
Yeah, this particular 4-pack I got at a liquor store.
Okay. So, do they sell in the liquor stores?
That's like in the mixers. The one near me has like 20 different kinds of ginger beer. So when I was I got into ginger beer because I had gotten into Dark and Stormies, which is dark rum and ginger beer. I hope you can't hear the siren behind me. And then I just decided hey, this ginger beer tastes pretty good even when you don't put alcohol in it. And so I just kept going to this liquor store and getting different ginger beers every week.
Interesting.
Until I found this one.
Perhaps that'll give me a reason to go back to the liquor store. I haven't been in so long. I just don't drink nearly as much as I never was a big drinker, but now I'm just like maybe once a month.
I am the biggest dork who will go into this huge liquor store and check out with like a bar of chocolate, 4-pack of ginger beer, and some tortilla chips. Like they have everything under the sun, and I'm like, no, just this.
Wow, that almost sounds like you're like the stoners trip, like to like this the Quickie Mart or whatever.
I was trying to pull it off, like I want to have that affect on my face, so it's like I'm hurriedly on my way to a party, and someone forgot these 3 things.
Okay. Just at some point they'll see through your ruse. Like, oh, another party, huh?
Yes. All right. So no coffee to speak of, but let's jump into the books. What do you have for me this week?
Well, as I posted on Instagram, it was sort of a tough decision this week. I've recently sort of reinventoried and reorganized my library, and there's at least 10 things I haven't read yet. that I need to get through, and then just a bunch of stuff I've had that I've read and have had in the archive for a little while that I really want to talk about. But I decided this week to pick something. A lot of people have been asking me sort of if I was to get into comics either again or get into comics as sort of a higher art form, because I sort of talk about a lot of books that aren't mainstream, little off the beaten path, very indie or very sort of next level in terms of comics, not just the bog standard story and archetypes. If somebody asked me like, well, how do I get into that stuff? I have a book that is sort of the perfect entry point. And it is one that I bought back in April at Floating World Comics in Portland. Hell of a great shop. If you ever are in Portland, please. Portland is the mecca of comic shops. Floating World is probably number 1 or number 2 on that list. It's just an indie lover's paradise. But the book
now is Floating World the one that's also a publisher?
Yeah, they're a small press publisher too, and they put out some really cool books. But their stuff fits so brilliantly with all the other stuff that they sell, and they're really freaking good at curating. You walk in, and there's right away before you even get through the door, there is a long table that has all their staff picks, and they rotate, I think, weekly. And they're constantly interesting things there. And on that very table, was a book called The Tipping Point, which is by various artists and authors, 14 of them to be precise. And it's published by Humanoids, which is, if you're not familiar, Humanoids is a European press, actually co-founded, if you will, by John Giraud, a.k.a. Moebius. And that was in, I think, like the early to mid 70s.
But it's also they do, correct me if I'm wrong, but not just, but they also do Jodorowsky.
Oh yeah. Well? If you ever bought a Jodorowsky book, chances are it's a Humanoids book for the most part. I think all of them except for maybe Inkle. But maybe, no, Inkle is too. I see it on my shelf right now. So yeah, all the Jodorowsky stuff's Humanoids. All your favorite international creators are usually Humanoids. And if you go to most comic stores that have a substantial indie section are going to have a Humanoids publisher section. So always look for it when you check it in. But this is actually a book that was put out. It's hardcover. It's an anthology collection around this concept of the tipping point. And I'm going to read the back sort of little description for you, because this is before I could open it up, it was actually sealed in plastic wrap, so I couldn't even thumb through it. I had to buy this one purely on faith. And here's the back sort of little description that sold me. It says, that key moment when a clear-cut split occurs, a mutation, a personal revolt, or a large-scale revolution tips us from one world into another, from one life into an entirely new one, is explored in this innovative anthology. This instant, this momentous change can be the beginning of a story or its end, one's pinnacle or fall, the tipping point. Witness these major and minor changes and evolution through the eyes of 14 visionaries from the worlds of manga, bande dessinée, there we go, I can never say that right, and comics. And so it's an anthology series, as it mentioned, and it really does. All of these short stories have something to do with the concept of the tipping point. And and it was created to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Humanoids. The publisher Fabri, I think it's Fabri Giger, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It looks like Fabric Geiger, but I think it's Fabrice Giger. He's got a wonderful intro that really frames this collection and his love of Humanoids as well, and it's very just deeply personal. You can tell he really cares about the company, and he really cares about their output. And this is kind of a really great intro into both Humanoids, but also international comics, indie comics, left of center, higher art kind of comics. And he was, by the way, Fabrice Giger is part of the group that ended up taking Humanoids, buying it back from Hachette, which had purchased it, I think, somewhere in the mid 80s or late 80s. So these guys, Giger was part of the group that bought that back. So he's been running it as publisher since then, which is cool. So it was a nice little history lesson to kind of read. I didn't realize, by the way, in that same intro, he mentions Moebius was a co-founder of Humanoids, which I didn't realize. Makes perfect sense though, because guess what the first Humanoids book was? It's a very famous one.
Well, the first Humanoids book. Yeah,
the first Humanoids book. And this would have been, to give you a hint, it would have been mid-70s. And it would have been something that, became a big hit in America at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't even know what came out of comics at that time.
Heavy metal.
Whoa! Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, that crazy. Yeah, exactly. So like if you're a comics historian, or if you're interested in that, if you've never read heavy metal, go check that out. It is bonkers, to say the least. It's actually been the inspiration for a lot of parodies and other kinds of similar things since then. But yeah, that was the first Humanoids book. I think Giroux was a huge contributor to that too, if I'm not mistaken, or was the lead artist even. So yeah, check that out. But this is a great little anthology. It is incredibly diverse in terms of the stories. They range from the absurd to the surreal to the literal to the comics as poetry that I've come to love. We talked about comics as poetry on a couple episodes ago. And that's just been something I've been a little bit more attuned to. I think there's been more releases lately that play into that. So there's some of those are really good. The art is absolutely, completely all over the place. You've got every possible form of comics art you can throw a stick at, and it's all really, really, really well done. There's everything from just like elaborate sketch to sort of the more traditional kind of superhero vibe to the really digital monochromatic vibe. This one's really almost like just like somebody would have sketched it on their journal. So just a lot of really cool stuff. The stories, I mean, they couldn't be more different. Like one story is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the point of view of Huck making that decision of whether or not he should turn in Jim. Another one is about this guy who doesn't believe in any internet conspiracy, and then throughout the course of the story, every single internet conspiracy comes true for him. So it's kind of a joke, sort of a joke parody story. Another one is about this lonely man who loses his cat, and he just wanders around this neighborhood and sort of observing it. That's one of the more of the comics as poetry ones. A really interesting one that took me by surprise was about this young boy who goes to summer camp, hasn't been enjoying it, sort of becomes, I think he goes to photography class and ends up being like the kid that just takes all the photos. And he ends up having his first gay experience. But it's the way it's, and not sexually, but the way it's portrayed is really freaking cool. It kind of uses the Schindler's List effect. So it's all black and white, but when he's having sort of this experience, like the idea of what's happening to him takes the form in his mind as like these colored, multicolored, like globule, sort of like almost like lava lamp things flowing around him. And so it's really fascinating. Kind of how it ends took me a little by surprise. A lot of twists, a lot of turns. Go ahead.
The tipping point, I guess when you were first describing it, I thought there was a specific tipping point that sort of centered this, but each writer is taking that however they want to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, like it could be the tipping point of a sexual encounter or anything else.
Exactly. It's almost like they told all creators, like, write something, make something that has something to do with the tipping point. And they all took it and ran with it. So you get to see, like, this is one of those great books. I have several of these, but these books that you could easily take each page or each, sort of concept and make it like a gallery showing or a gallery, like exhibit somewhere. It's just like walking through and seeing, here's this person's perspective, but it's all collected in book form. I love comics like that. So this is, if you're looking for something that's like, man, what can I get into that would really break open the way I think about comics and kind of give me more to chew on? This is an excellent buy, excellent gift too for somebody who's, maybe into a lot of independent just art in general. Runs about $30 for the hardcover. I think that's the only version that exists. And like I said, there's some cool intros. There's some cool stuff in the back too. Not a lot of extra features or anything, but just like some interesting commentaries.
Were you previously like aware of Humanoid as a publisher when you saw this? Oh,
definitely. So
I pre-endorsed for you.
Yeah. Time Warp Comics in Boulder has a really good Humanoid section.
Yeah, they do.
So I think when I first went in that store, that's where I first encountered the brand officially, and then I've been aware of it because the logo and the label is pretty distinct looking. You can usually see it pretty easily on a shelf somewhere. So anytime I see it, I usually gravitate towards it because it's like, okay, what cool thing are they doing?
Yeah.
Sometimes they get a little bit like, there's some Humanoids releases that are really extreme where you're like, oh man, I may not be mature enough to handle this yet, or just, I may not be avant-garde enough, which is fine. Like, I love that there's really no limit on what they'll put out, which is why Jodorowsky is such a, is perfectly at home there, in terms of his content. Like, cause he ranges from like the sweet and the simple to like just the batshit craziest surreal thing you could possibly imagine. So yeah, this book is very accessible though. I don't think there's a single story in here that is too mature. I think you could give this to a 13-year-old and they'd be like, they'd really dig it. There's nothing, you want to be a little smart to appreciate it, but otherwise it's very, very accessible. So all
I'm trying to nail down like that. So like you started out by saying, when people ask, like, if you were getting into it now, what would you sort of recommend? So I'm trying to paint that picture of that reader that's going to be interested in this. So I was hoping we could drill down on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I would say if you're somebody who maybe you were into comics either via He-Man, like I was, when you were a kid, or just through the big two, and you've left, or you've been with comics the whole time, but you're just like, man, I want something more. I would say it's somebody who's interested in the format again, who doesn't know where to start, but maybe you've read a lot of fiction. Maybe you've read, everything from George R. R. Martin to, I'm trying to think of like something more like, what's the guy who wrote Da Vinci Code? Dan Brown. Maybe you're like, you're really into lots of different kinds of stories. Maybe you're somebody who's just really into visual art. You like going to the galleries. Maybe you're somebody who's really, you've got a book of Rilke poems or a lot of, college poetry or that kind of thing. Maybe you're somebody who's into short stories, writing short stories, reading them. I would say anybody who's that curious, like, give them this, because this will open them up to a whole new way of thinking about comics. And I think anybody who's got an appreciation for art and creation and independent sort of takes on things, you will really dig this. I
like the way you said that. It'll like open them up to, what like the possibilities of comics.
Who I would not give this to is somebody who only thinks comics is the big two.
Yeah.
Or who's, like, you ask them, like, what are comics? They're like, oh, Iron Man, Superman, and Batman, and like that's really, like, they don't even know who Hawkeye is. It's just like somebody who's just so either so mainstream. Like, here's a great way to put it. Walmart just announced a deal where they're putting out like these big crazy trade paperbacks, I think, of DC stuff, like really, really cheaply. Maybe it's Marvel and DC. I think it is big too. But these crazy like trades for like, next to nothing. And I think anybody who goes to get those, nothing wrong with that. But like, if that's sort of your main buy, this is probably not for you just yet. Get into the medium, or come at it from outside the medium, wanting to get in.
No, that's interesting, because I always think like if someone came to me and said, I used to read comics, I haven't read them since I was a kid, what should I get into? Usually I would actually go for something like that's big too, but a different kind of story, like sort of like how you and I have talked about Watchmen being a big touch point for when you're an adult and reading it and going that
was my gateway back in.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Batman's The Long Halloween was that for me. Mm-hmm. So it's good to know, the indie route, I guess. Are there authors and artists from this that you then started following because you read this?
Not yet. I'm following them loosely. I did go online and kind of like look up some of them as well. But yeah, everyone in here I've never heard of before, and they range from Japanese creators, French, Spanish. I think there's a Israeli creator in here at some point. But it's all translated so perfectly. None of it's not English. Like, it's all translated. And the translations make sense. One of them is completely silent. Actually, two of them are completely silent. So that's kind of fun to go through. But yeah, it's all of it is just these guys. I'm going to be looking out for these creators moving forward, especially on some of like my favorite stories from this. But I think these are all. None of these guys have had like a lot of. It's not like they put Moebius in here. This is like. A lot of these guys, I don't think, have had a lot of major hits, especially in America. So it's a cool way to expose yourself to new artists too. Cool.
Excellent. I have something off the beaten path as well.
Okay.
Not a big two book, not a superhero book. I mean, I guess I kind of broke my streak with Betty and Veronica a couple weeks ago, but Yeah, I went a little hard on the Avengers for many weeks there,
Yeah.
So I decided to revisit a comic from several years ago. It is it's very hard to define if it's strips or single. I guess it's just single panels, and it is called Henry and Glenn Forever.
Oh my gosh, I haven't even heard of this.
Well, it as the clerk at the comic book store where I go described it to me. So the cover is pretty clearly Glenn Danzig getting his shoulders massaged by Henry Rollins.
Oh my gosh! As soon as you said Henry Rollins, cover popped up for me. Oh my god!
And Glenn saying, "Do you really think it could last forever?" And I remember when I this was just sitting on the counter one day at the comic shop, and I went, "Oh wow, this looks intriguing." It's sort of the size of a 7-inch record, so it sort of looked like a little, single vinyl. And the clerk goes, "Yeah, it's about them being roommates."
With air quotes, I'm guessing.
She said it like that, and I was like, "Well, sold. I don't need to know anything else." So, it's about Glenn Danzig and Henry Rollins.
For those who don't know, who are those two guys?
So Glenn Danzig is famous as the first singer of the Misfits, and then a solo artist who sang about his mother. And Henry Rollins is famous as the third or fourth maybe singer of Black Flag, but the one under whom they achieved maybe a little bit more success than one of the first four. I don't know. He actually he was not the singer for Black Flag all along. But big punk rock guys from the 80s, basically, sort of on the hardcore edge. This is so it's all single page, mostly single panel, and for the most part, it depicts Henry and Glenn. They're both very muscular dudes, or maybe Glenn is not so muscular anymore, but dense. But Glenn is also a very short person, and Henry's a very tall person. So they're depicted in this mostly through this. They're depicted in this very funny way where Glenn's face is basically Sluggo's face from the Nancy cartoon, and Henry's face is the Dick Tracy face from the Dick Tracy comic.
Oh, wow.
So, which works perfectly, and like Danzig has this little mullet. They're both always in black. Henry is never wearing any shoes. And so they are, they are not, like they are in a committed, caring relationship in this book. And their neighbors are Hall and Oates, who are possibly Satanists. And it is just it's like hilarious and weird. I could see, these are the kind of comics I could see in a fanzine or something. But they're so sort of just seeing them all together in this series. It's like none of them make any sense next to each other, and there are a couple of running jokes, like Danzig always asking Henry, do these pants make my butt look fat? And it's just, I don't know. It's just a lot of fun. It's very, very strange. It is definitely a coffee table kind of book where especially if you have friends who are into Rollins and Danzig, this is a perfect thing to just, leave lying on the table just so that anyone can pick it up and go, oh my God, that's bizarre. It's not a thing where you sit down and read a story to it.
How long is each page like basically like a sequence?
Yeah, it's almost like no. Sorry, it's all like single panel, like a family circus.
I know, but is it? It's like it's not telling one story start to finish. Like each
right. Yes.
There's another like one
exactly.
Okay, it's like Wilson. Wilson. That's a bad example. It's just like
I kind of wondered that, like
Garfield.
Like Garfield, except even that has panels.
No, not the panel thing, but just the fact that Garfield, Garfield's book isn't like, the Garfield's bad day. It's not like that. It's just like, hey, here's another bunch of Garfield stuff. Here you go. Yeah,
it is split up in between. So like I said, the majority of it is drawn in this way of where Danzig looks like Sluggo and Rollins looks like Dick Tracy. But it's also broken up by sort of a print that where Rollins is always say it's like the same print over and over, and they just change the dialogue. Like Rollins says something, and Danzig's remark is always "Me too," and so it's just like that's a running kind of theme throughout this. But it's also broken up by pages from their diary, which are written in like handwritten on not loose leaf paper, but like spiral notebook paper. And I think it's Henry's are always like you sort of notice that Henry's are always torn at the edge, like it's been ripped out of a notebook. And there are little tiny things in there, like Henry at one point confesses to stealing pages out of Glenn's notebook to write his own diary. And so Henry's also talking about how he's reading Glenn's diary when he does that. And Glenn's diary entries always say "Dear Diary," and then Henry's say "Dear Henry." Which is very confusing, but he says something like in one of the very first ones, like, "I don't know why I addressed this to myself."
God.
There are also several just single panels where it's a song reference, and usually, or at least, sorry, I got to say this in a better way. The only ones I recognize are Danzig song titles. So if there are a bunch of Rollins jokes sprinkled through here, I don't know what they are. But there will be. I just flipped past one. Oh yeah, there's like a "Where Eagles Dare" reference. There's a "Last Caress" reference. There are just things like that. And this was created by an art collective. So I haven't read I didn't follow it when it was coming out. So I don't know if they were just being presented on the internet one at a time and gain this following.
Well, I'm looking at it right now, and if you just Google it, there's all these different alternative covers that I'm finding out are covers of like the single issues. Apparently, that this was you must be talking about the collected edition with the green.
Well, yeah,
cover. That's the one you have, right?
Yeah, a while ago I went through and tried to figure those out, and I don't think they're actually single issues. I think they're sort of like terms and conditions, which we talked about several episodes ago, where they were doing parody covers of famous covers, but putting Glenn, like, because I've noticed there's a Captain America one, there's a Cable one, like Cable and Deadpool one, and so, but those, it's only like few and far between that I recognize, like, oh, that's that. Like, there's a He-Man one actually, where Castle Grayskull's in the background, and they're doing that pose where like Henry is He-Man holding the sword above his head, and I don't know who would have been like sort of crouching in front of him or kneeling, if that was She-Ra or somebody else, but that's Glenn. Like, so yeah, I think those were just I don't think those were single issues, but they're also not in this book. And then I know they released another book called I think it's called Forever and Ever. Or do you see that come up? Because my browser stopped working. Yeah. So that may have more of the art in it, because that was an actual new, like, different edition that they put out. It's called Forever and Ever, the complete edition. And I've also seen on the main artist, at least I can't tell if he's done everything or not, named Tom Neely. And on his website, which is iwilldestroyyou.com, he has a lot of like single prints of in the same style. So I assume he's responsible for most of it. But it's it's just sort of like I dug into it when I got it. I dug into it a little bit. Recently, when I knew I was going to do it on an upcoming episode, I dug into it more today. And there's just this thing of like I was hesitant to do that, and it was because it's such a good prank or like in joke or whatever, that I almost didn't want to know the whole context of it. I like when I was Googling it, and if you do this, I'm sure you will find there's one specific interview that's referenced in about 10 different articles where someone asked Rollins about this. But it's like, I don't really care what they think. Like there's a quote on the back that says, "Has Glenn seen this? Trust me, he would not be amused." And that's attributed to Henry. But I don't know if he actually said that or if that's still part of the game and like the prank, So anyway, at the end of it, they have a little page sort of about the art collective Igloo Tornado that put this out. So it sounds like maybe it's the work of these 4 people that are in that collective, but one of them they won't name. Like they always strike through his name in the print. And then, so there's all these little pranks, all along. Like this is very close to just reading a punk rock zine.
Okay.
And just feeling like I don't really understand all this stuff, but I'm really amused by whatever group of people put this out. And so, and it's just, it's a short little thing. Like I said, if you're a fan of this, but put it on your coffee table, you will definitely, it will be a conversation starter. I don't know how else you do it. Maybe you could just bring it to bars with you and leave it on the table where you're sitting. I have I think it was from Yesterday's, which is like a maker of fan stuff and mostly like enamel pens. I have a Henry and Glenn Forever pen from them that I got at Comic-Con last year. So I have it on my bag. So maybe someone will see that and kind of give me a knowing, nod or wink or something. I definitely wanted to read Carrie Brownstein's quote in the beginning from one of their like review quotes, that appears on the front page. Just because I thought it summed it up so great. So Carrie says, it plays into the inherent homoeroticism of early mosh pit man piles, but also acknowledges that just as fans are at the mercy of our idols' creative whims, musical heroes and legends are also subject to the imaginations of the listeners.
That's amazing. Wow.
So I thought that was great. Yeah.
Hell of a good quote. So, so the one you're talking about, Amazon says it's like 64 pages. that is accurate.
Probably this. Yes.
Okay, cool. Because I'm looking at Henry and Glenn Forever and Ever. That's a much different thing.
Yeah.
And then I'm still trying to figure out, it seems like there's different versions of Forever and Ever.
Yeah. I know. I'm on Tom Neely's site. And so there's one cover that's like the American Gothic, whatever that painter was. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Version of it. And then there's another one that's the Spider-Man Amazing Stories #1 or whatever that Spider-Man, that cover is amazing. And I think that's the one that's on Amazon where Henry's just wearing a GIMP mask and swinging in on a microphone cable over a crowd of like at a rock concert. And he's carrying Glenn as Spider-Man carried like Goblin or whatever in that cover. Maybe that wasn't Amazing Stories #1, but anyway. It's a great, I don't know. It's just a great art prank. I love all the inside references to other comics and styles. It's not as fully loaded as Terms and Conditions. So that was almost like reading an academic work, visually. Yeah. Like at the time, I think I described it as like an art exhibition. I would love to have seen that on walls. This is much more like, just sort of pranky prints and reinterpretations and stuff. But
okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to know enough about Henry and Glenn as just artists, like as music guys to appreciate this? I mean, if you came in completely ignorant of them,
it would. Yeah, that's a good point. It's music not
guys is a new term.
It's definitely not like this is not a thing that if you're just getting into comics, I would not recommend this to people. It's it's not.
You have to be.
You don't have to be a
scene.
You don't have to be a super fan, but it helps. And you definitely, I would think, need to be a specific former listener of one of those two people to think this is as funny as it is.
Okay.
Especially when you consider. I texted a friend of mine today, Axe Slasher, who has a podcast called The Filth Chamber that you might want to check out if you like horror movies and metal music. Filth. And I asked him what his opinion of just Danzig was, because another friend today had said something like, I can't really tell where the line is in reality and satire with Danzig. And and Axe Slasher told me, hold on, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, first and foremost, it's definitely not satire to Danzig the man. He's painfully serious. So he's just talking about like the Danzig band, like and Danzig the man is like super serious about his own music. So when he sings like these, these songs that are like sort of cartoonishly evil, he's not joking around.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that about how serious, or it's seemingly seriously, Danzig takes himself makes this a lot funnier. That he's kind of the goofy one who's trying to be funny in this book. hanging out with Hall and Oates, and writing in a diary like it, Rollins, I don't know. Sometimes appears not to have a sense of humor to me, but he at least, like, having seen him in interviews and stuff, he's, a more approachable human person than Danzig. Like, Danzig is just sort of, cartoonishly standoffish and dark. So
I'm still thinking about where I want to put the filth chamber in my igloo tornado. Just these names, these amazing names. There was another one. What was the first one you said earlier that was really impressive? I forget it. It was right before filth. Igloo tornado. There's like another name you mentioned, but
Axe Slasher.
I think so. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, well, that's a band, so you should definitely pick up some Axe Slasher. Geez, I don't know. Well, that's my review. I got nothing more for you.
Oh man, well, this
short book. That's a short review.
Been a lovely episode. We'll be back again, although I won't be back again until after. Right. Let's see. I am getting, for those of you who don't know, I'm getting married on Saturday, and I'll be out. Yes, thank you.
Best wishes.
Thank you. There will be reports from the field, I'm sure. I will not be back this weekend, and then the following week we're going on our honeymoon, so I'll be gone that weekend too. So Todd is going to have to figure out another way. We got some things bubbling up in the cauldron. Maybe a couple of special guests to tide us over until your return, and then I don't know how we're going to do it, but we've got San Diego Comic-Con coming up shortly thereafter. So we have to figure out some way to do a special episode. We tried this last year, and I think it was like just too exhausting for me to come home from that and then do a report. Yeah. But we'll try to figure something out, or and we will absolutely cover it sort of in retrospective after the event. But that's what's coming up. Until then, where can people find and download this podcast and others like it? Findusthere.org is the website. Get us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, Google Play, and the new Google Podcasts app. That's right. Thank you. Yes, Google has updated their game yet again. So the Google Podcast app, they could have come up with a better. You think they could have come up with like Gcast or something a little bit catchier than that? I can't believe it's not called Play Podcasts. Playcasts, something. They're like Microsoft now with like all these 1,800 different names. It's like, come on, guys. The Zoom, the Xbox, the Windows gaming platform. Anyway, find us in all those places. And then I am at by Taylor Trask on Instagram and Twitter. And I am at Hey Todd A on those places. Although I just have been really checked out of Twitter lately, and I'm going to try to stay that way. I'm just. Right. It's just a fury making machine. I log in. It's like just the comments section, which has made it so awful. Yeah, you're right, man. Wow, it used to be more of a feed for me. Like I would go into it and I would click on links. Like, okay, I'm going to read that news story and I'm going to read that review, watch that video. Now it's just like, it's just the comments section for me. So I'm anyway. Sorry for that downer at the end here. All our well wishes to you on your upcoming nuptials, and we will catch you, Taylor, when you're back from your honeymoon. That'll be exciting. And I'll have more picks then too. We'll be back. We'll see you guys then, or I'll see you guys then. I'll see you later, and I'll see you next week.